multi-page graphic design or a multi-page document is a bit like building a house. You start with the foundations to build a stable structure, and then you build up from there. So before we actually get down to putting a document together, I'd like to talk for a minute or two about layout.
Suzanne?
Yes?
Can you please hold on just a minute? I would like just to remind our people how to ask questions.
Okay.
Okay, sorry for everybody. Yeah. So this webinar, Suzanne will do the demo for about 1 hour and 15 minutes. So my name is Cécile Brosius. I'm the product marketing manager for CorelDRAW, and I will be moderating and handling the logistics for this webinar. So as you have understood, Suzanne Smith, who is our CorelDRAW specialist and trainer, will be doing the demo as well as answering your questions. So for your information, this webinar will be recorded and will be available on our website for future viewing. Please be aware that everyone on the line will be on mute for the entire sessions. To ask a question, Suzanne will be answering your question during the 15 last minutes of this webinar. Please use the GoToWebinar console on the right-hand side of your screen. You simply select the third panel from the bottom of the console and click the sign plus to reveal the questions window. Then click in the questions field and we'll answer, of course, as many questions as possible. If we can't answer all the questions, we'll make sure to take your email address and go back to you with our feedback. So, yes, Suzanne, now you can start. Sorry for cutting your beginning.
And
thank you very much for this demo on all your techniques around laying out documents in CorelDRAW X6, and have a good demo. Thank you.
Thank you. So, let's, where was I? Yes, multi-page documents and creating a framework for designing your multi-page documents with. During this demonstration, we're actually going to be using most of the new features in the brand new CorelDRAW Graphics Suite X6. If you're not yet using X6 yourself, then do download a trial version from our website, and as soon as this webinar becomes available as a film for viewing after the event, then you can basically go through the tutorial again yourself. So I just want to start, before we actually begin designing a document, just to talk a little bit about layout itself. So what is layout exactly? Well, the actual definition of layout is management of form and space. In other words, the arrangement of elements on your page. It's not just about putting things on a page and moving it around, though. It's about arranging textual and visual elements in such a way that the information on the page is communicated to the reader with a minimum of effort. Now, I'm sure all of us have at one time been in a bookshop looking for a specific book on a particular subject. And the way that a book looks and the layout of a book plays a big part in whether we're going to buy that book or not, how easy it is to read, how appealing it is to us, how much we like the design. And that's why layout is a very important part of creating a document and just taking time to think a little bit about what you're trying to achieve with your document. A good layout should be able to easily guide a reader's eye through even quite complex subject matter. Having said that, there are guidelines for layouting, but no golden rules except for one, and that is content comes first. Now, there are different types of layouts. You could, of course, just do a freestyle layout and just place elements on a page. Now, that's going to be fine if you've just got a single-page document. But as soon as you've got a multi-page document, as you go from page to page, as a reader, you'll actually start to notice that there is an underlying layout to a book, for example. So you might want to work with guidelines. Guidelines just place a loose framework on the page, but it still allows you the flexibility to move objects around within those guidelines. And the most inflexible, but perhaps easiest to use, variation is working with templates. Now with a template, everything's already been put on the page for you, and all you need to do is go in and swap out different elements and replace them with your own custom designs. And for example, if we go up to File and we choose New from Template, this new version of CorelDRAW, CorelDRAW X6, has over 350 professionally designed templates, and as you can see they cover advertisements, brochures, business cards, etc. And sometimes templates just give you a very good idea on how layouting works. So if you're just starting off with CorelDRAW at all, you can just open up one of the templates and just pull it apart to see how it's been constructed. Now, although most layouts work along a framework of invisible lines or grids, other, more modern layout designs are based on modules. And then there's yet another method which follows classical principles, similar methods of constructing documents as was used by classical painters, for example. And not to forget that the purpose of a document will, to some extent, dictate the layout. So for example, are you producing your document for online reading, or are you perhaps writing a novel, or is it mostly illustrations? And these are all going to play a role in how you set your document up. So I'm just going to open the Object Manager here. And as you can see here, we've got a very simple layout. But if I just turn the image off for a moment, and you can see I've built this up using layers, I just want to show you for a second how you can set up some guidelines. So if you want to set up central guidelines, for example, just drag out a guideline from either of the rulers, and if you hit P on your keyboard, this will place the guideline precisely in the middle of the page. So I'm just going to undo this now. So I started off basically by just putting down some central guidelines, and then I added some margins. Now of course you have to think about whether is this going to be printed, is it just for online viewing, and that will determine how much of a margin you actually want to add. And I generally tend to have my header half the width of my footer here. I also divided my page into 4 equal segments, so I've basically quartered this page. And finally I placed another 4 guidelines going vertically. If I now turn the image back on, you can see that it roughly fits in within the framework of this template. So continuing on here I've got another setup, but again if I turn the guidelines on, you can see it's set up to exactly the same set of guidelines. So I'm just going to go through a couple of variations here, turning on the guidelines as we go. And another way, if you want to see if a layout is working, I'm on page 6 here, if you go into View and you go down to Page Sorter View, these are basically the 4 pages that I used using the same layout grid. You can see that although the layout differs from page to page, it still has a certain harmony in proportions, and that is basically what you're aiming for. So I'm just going to go back out of Page Sorter View. Now, a more modern approach to laying out pages is sometimes to use modules instead of lines. And the modules themselves can be used as containers or again as a framework for setting up image and text containers. So here's an example now where I've just added some content to that set of modules I was using. A very classical way of setting up an image to fit within classical proportions is known as the rule of thirds. And if you go to an art gallery, you'll find that a lot of the older paintings and the old masters used to actually use the rule of thirds to bring focus on certain parts of their paintings. And as you can see here, we have axis. Just imagine I have 2 separate pages here. we have axes here and focal points. And the old masters believed that by aligning your most important elements in your photograph or your painting along these lines and putting a focus where a focal point is, you can actually create a whole different dynamism in your images. So if I just, for example, let me just turn off some of the elements here. I'm now going to insert an image that's been cropped without paying any attention to the rule of thirds at all. And then I'm going to show you an image where the rule of thirds is being applied. So let's just turn the image on here. So in this first image at the top, let me just zoom in here. You can see we've got our baseball guy here. I'm just going to turn the grid off again. We've got our baseball guy in the middle, but it looks almost as if he's batting off into the distance. And his players here, his team, are way out on the side, on the sideline. There isn't really much of a communication here going on. If we move down, however, to the second image, and let me just turn the text off here, and I'll turn the grid on to show you how this works. The player has now been placed along this axis, and the main guy here, he's actually squatting here where this focal point is. And as a result, just turn my grid off, this is much more dynamic. Let's just go back out into F4 so we can compare that. It actually looks as if he's batting towards his team here. So it does make a difference if you just think about how you're going to set up your document. And the final thing I want to show you is the really classic method. Now, people first started thinking about layout back in the Middle Ages when the first printing press was developed or discovered. And since then, over the centuries, many typographers and printers have tried to create the most beautifully harmonious books, because back in those days books were luxury items. At the beginning of the last century, a genial German typographer called Jan Schichold developed this classic layout. And here we're not really working with grids and guidelines. Jan Schichold was more interested in having harmonious proportions in his design. And if you've got time or you're interested in this topic generally, just check out Canons of construction in the internet, and just check out a little bit more about layouting, and it's actually quite a fascinating story. So that's the short introduction, and I'm just going to close this document now, and we're going to create our own. Now, because we only have just a little under an hour, we're going to do a 4-page restaurant menu. I'm not going to use quite as complicated grids as I've just shown you, for the sake of simplicity in getting this done. But let's just start here. So we're going to start by creating a new document, and I'm going to start to show you some of the new features in X6. So we're going to click on New, and this Create a New Document dialog box was introduced with CorelDRAW X5, but new to this version is the ability to add a specific number of pages. In previous versions of CorelDRAW, if you wanted to add additional pages, you had to go up to the Layout menu and add pages, or click on the plus icon at the bottom where the page navigator is. And this saves you a lot of time. If you know how many pages you're roughly going to need, you can set this up straight away. So here we have our 4 pages. Now, by default, the Object Manager will be open, and here you can see each page. At the moment it has no content, but if you're doing a multi-page document that's perhaps 10, 20 or even more pages, this list can get full quite quickly, and it can become quite difficult to navigate if you don't start as you intend to go on by working quite organized within your document. So what I personally like to do is I like to go down here and just start naming my pages. So this is going to be the menu cover. Then we're going to have the main dishes. Wines and spirits. And finally we're going to have the beverages. And what you'll notice is that as I've been naming tabs here, the object manager has automatically been updated, and now if I need to jump to a page quickly, at least I know where I am in my document. So I now want to add a page background. So I'm going up to the layout menu, and if we take a quick look at the layout menu, some of the commands here are identical to commands that you'll find if you right-click on the page tab here. I just want to show you one thing. If you are using a trial version of CorelDRAW Graphics Suite X6 at the moment, if you go under the help file and you go highlight what's new and you pick the version you're using at the moment, let's say for example X4, all of the features that you don't yet have but you would have if you upgraded to X6, they'll be highlighted in orange. So it just makes it easy for you to jump into the new features and make a decision about whether they'll be useful for you or not. So I'm just going to turn this off again. So page background, layout, and down to page background. Why a page background? A page background is not an object sitting on your page. It's an integral part of the page. That is why you need to make sure as well that you always have this box checked, print and export background, because otherwise you might have a nice background for your page but it won't be exported or printed. And because this is a menu, I'm just going to choose a colour for the background and click on OK. And because it's the page background, it's going to appear on every single page of my document. So now I'm going to start by setting up some guides. Now, if you want a set of guidelines to appear on every single page of your document, you place those guides on the master page guide layer. Any guidelines you create here will appear on every single page. If, however, you want to be a little bit more freestyle and you want to set each page up individually, you can click on the guides layer that applies to a specific page only. So these are independent of each other. But for the moment, I'm just going to set up some guides for all pages. Before I start, the 0, 0 coordinate of my ruler is normally at the bottom left, but if you ever need to move this, you just grab the corner and drag your coordinate out and place wherever you want. You might, for example, want an XY coordinate in the middle of your page. So I'm just going to drag out my first guideline and hit P on the page to place it in the center. Drag out another guideline, P on the page to place it in the center. Now I'm going to double click because I want to create some margins here. So I'm going to double click on my ruler, and this brings up the ruler options. And under the ruler options, you've also got the guidelines here. So first of all, I'm going to set up some horizontal guidelines. You can, of course, drag it down and try to line it up, but I find that a little bit fiddly. But here you can place guidelines at precise distances. So I've already worked out where I need my guidelines. So I need one at -280, add, and you'll see it appearing automatically on the page. And then I need a second one at -10. So I've got my top margin. Going down to vertical, again I'm just going to add a couple of guidelines here. So that's my margins more or less set up. And I've kept the top margin a little bit narrower. And the next thing I'm going to do is create a page frame. Now all of these guidelines at the moment are on the master layer. So you have to be careful and just make sure that when you're finished with setting things up on the master layer, just to show you these guidelines appear on every page, make sure that when you now start working on your first page, that you go up to the first page. So I'm just going to click on layer 1. Now I want to create a frame for this page. So the first thing I'm going to do is to double click on my rectangle tool, And you can see this will create a rectangle precisely the same size as the page. I'm going to fill this with black, and we can see that here. So I'm going to just hit plus on my numerical keypad to create a duplicate, and I'm just going to put a different color in here so I can see it. Holding down my shift key, I'm just going to scale this second rectangle inwards a slight degree. So I'm now selecting both rectangles because I'm going to use this top rectangle to punch a hole in the lower one. So up to the property bar, and I'm clicking on Simplify. So now I can basically select the white rectangle. I don't need it anymore, so I can just delete it. And now I've got a nice black frame here, and because I'm nice and tidy, I'm just going to rename this to Frame. It just helps you if you ever need to change anything along the way. Now if we go down the View menu, you'll see that under Guidelines, which are appearing here, I've got a shortcut key. Now you probably won't see this because I've actually created some shortcut keys for things that I find useful myself. And turning guidelines on and off very quickly is something that I personally use a lot. So if you want to create any shortcuts yourself, just go up to Tools, down to Customization, and click on Commands. And under Commands you'll find every command in CorelDRAW, or every available command, sorted into menus. You can of course have all the items showing here. But if I stick with this for example and I choose any command, you see here I have a shortcut key tab, and here I can put my own shortcut key in and assign it, and that will then become visible in the menus here. So I'm going to use my Alt-G just to make my guidelines disappear. So the next thing I want to do is just create a logo. This is the cover page for a restaurant. The restaurant's called Contrast, so I want to do a logo that reflects somewhat the name of the restaurant. So perhaps I do need my guidelines, so let's put those back in again. So I'm choosing my ellipse tool, and I'm holding down the Control key to get a perfect circle. So something like this, and just snap that here to the center. I'm going to fill this with white and just increase the width of the outside outline. So the next thing I want to do is I want to put the name of the restaurant across the top here. So over to my text tool, or I could also press F8. I'm going to type Contrast. Let's just bring this up a little bit. Bring this over here. So add an extra letter here, sorry. So Z on my keyboard to go into the zoom tool, and I'm just going to zoom in here. Now the next new feature in CorelDRAW which I'd like to show you, and which is an enormous time saver, and I think it's one of the top 3 features why it's really worth upgrading to X6, is the brand new Object Properties window. Now, normally if you click on an object in CorelDRAW, it could be a text object such as this, or a shape. To change the properties of this, you have to go over to the palette to change the color, go over to the text tool, come up here to the property bar, perhaps drop down a menu to access some command or other, and it's a lot of traveling about with the mouse. The new Object Properties Docker gives you every single property that could possibly be associated with the object that you've selected. This is a piece of artistic text, so I've got character properties. So the first thing I'm going to do here, for example, is change the font to Sapfino. I can change the color of the font, the size of the font. Let's bring this size down a little bit. And it's all you see everything change as it happens. Down here we've got a fantastic new feature called OpenType feature support. Now it does depend on the manufacturer of a particular OpenType font which properties have been included in this font. So if I just grab my text tool here and just select it, you'll notice two things. Some of the features here become active, some are grayed out, which means this particular font doesn't have these features accessible, but it does have ornaments, it has standard ligatures, it has style sets, and you can actually drop down these lists if you want to choose one. But what I prefer to do is that once you've selected a piece of OpenType text, if it does have subsets of features, you'll see this little triangle here, and clicking on this gives you instant access and an instant preview of the subsets of styles contained within this OpenType font. And I think I'm going to go with contrast. It's still a little bit big, so I'm just going to go down a little bit. I'm just going to bring this in to the middle. So back to my zoom tool with Z. Let's go over here now. And what I want to do now is I want to have a black and white contrast thing going on here. So I'm going to choose my 2-point line tool, and starting outside of the shape, I'm going to hold down my control key to draw a vertical line. And I'm just making sure that it's actually going over the edge of the circle. Now we have a fantastic tool over here called the Smart Fill tool. And what this does is it recognizes where objects overlap each other. So what I'm going to do first is let's zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to choose the color white, and here I have the outline options, and I don't want an outline. So the first thing I'm going to do is to click on my black text to cover this with a white object. And I'm going back up, I'm choosing black. And that's the sort of effect that I'm looking for at the moment. Let's just turn my guidelines off at the moment. So this line that I drew, I don't need that anymore, so I'm just going to delete that. So now I've basically got my logo in place. I'm going to add some more text. So I'm just going to add some text here. And just bring this over here. I think I'll just turn my guidelines on again. You can see how quick it is if you just set up key shortcuts for just doing the things that you do the most frequently. So I have another piece of text here. So in my object properties, I'm going to change this to Frutica Serif, which is another OpenType font. I'm going to leave the color. I'll leave the size as it is at the moment. And down under paragraph, I can now change the alignment. I could also, if I want to, I've got all the other settings here, I could change character spacing if I want to. That looks quite good. So back down now to my text tool, and again I want to see which OpenType features are available for this font. And there are not as many as for this Apfino, but I do quite like this and sign here, so I'm going to choose this variation, Stylistic Set 1. And let's go and have a look at this line. And I'll leave that as it is. I'm just going to space this out a little bit. Okay, so already what you're seeing here is you can do all of your adjustments and editing for any single object within this one panel. Now I want a final bit of text on page 1, and then we're done. So what I'm going to do is just type another piece of text. Go over here, scroll back up again, and this changing the properties of a text. At the moment I'm going backwards and forwards and doing this manually, but on the next page I'm going to show you how to cut time doing this as well by using another new feature called object styles. So and I'm just going to, let's just bring the size down and place this here. So this is my page 1, and I can always go back and change this, but for the moment I'm going to leave it as it is. So over to page 2, into the Object Manager, and I'm just going to make sure I'm on page 2, layer 1. I'm going to create a very easy frame on this one, not as extensive as on page 1. So double click on my rectangle, and I'm just going to make this a little bit thicker. And what I want to do now is, because this is called my main dishes, I want some nice pictures of food here, and I want the dishes themselves in text boxes at the bottom. So I'm going to start off by creating some shapes, and I want these to be 30 by 30. And I'm going back to my pick tool. All I'm going to do now is I want 4 boxes, so I'm just going to drag and hit the space bar, and I'm deliberately scattering these for a specific reason. Now, to get perfect alignment, there are various ways of doing this. You can have your objects snap to each other or snap to guidelines. I'm going to show you various ways of alignment as we go through this tutorial. But what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to select these 4 objects, and up on the property bar I'm going to choose Align and Distribute. Now I want these objects to be aligned through their center point, so on the Alignment tab I'm going to choose Center Horizontally. And distribution, I want them to be evenly spaced, so I'm going to choose Spacing, and I want them to be spaced over the extent of the selection, which means from one grabbing handle to the other. So I'm going to say Apply, and these are now perfectly aligned at the top of my page. So let's just grab these, plus on my keyboard to create copies, and holding the Control key, I'm just going to drag my copies down. I'm just going to zoom in here for a second. So now we've come to the point where I actually need to put content in these boxes. So we're now going to leave CorelDRAW and we're going to go into Corel Connect. So I'm going to go up here. You can open Connect from within the CorelDRAW interface. In this case, Corel Connect opens up as a docking window and a tray. But for the sake of a nice big screen, I'm just going to use the application launcher and launch Corel Connect from here. Now Corel Connect has also had some major enhancements in this version. One of the most important enhancements in comparison to version X5 is the fact that you can now add additional trays. So you can see here I've already got 3 trays here, and of course you can rename the tray. Because if you do any sort of design work on a professional basis, you're going to be juggling several projects at one go. So it actually makes sense to gather all your assets into different trays here. Now, let's just put a search word in here for a moment. Let's go for food. And as you can see, because all of my filters are switched on, I have folders, bitmaps, and vectors. If I like the look of anything, I can just drag it down into my tray. Or let's see what else goes with a restaurant. Let's have some salad. Drag this down to the tray. Brand new in this version as well is the ability to right-click on a bitmap and say Install as bitmap pattern. You probably already know that in CorelDRAW, when you create a shape, one of the tools in your toolbox is the fill bucket, as I like to call it, the fill tool. And you have various patterns in there. You can now add any of these bitmaps or any of the vectors to your collections of patterns in CorelDRAW. Now, you don't only have to search, of course, within the CorelDRAW X6 content. So you do have 10,000 clip arts, 1,000 brand new photos, etc. You can also go online. For example, you have online services offering you high quality stock photo. So if I now search again, if I scroll down, at some point we'll come to the Photolia images. You can see there's an awful lot of images in here, and right down the bottom we have the Photolia images. If you hover over a thumbnail here, because this is an online image that needs to be bought, you'll have a watermark on it. But you do have the option then, once you've got your image, to buy it from that service provider. Another option that you have, if I just minimize my window, I'm just going to minimize Draw, you can actually drag objects from outside into your tray. So, for example, I could just drag, let's see what I've got here. I can drag images that perhaps the customer sent me. So if this is a restaurant owner, he might want me to put specific images in his menu. So I'm just going to take some of the stuff that this restaurant sent me. I got really hungry putting this workshop together, guys, I can tell you. And I'm just going to bring in some vector files as well. And I can also drag in, for example, PDFs. And also brand new in this version of Corel Connect, you can copy directly from the tray or from here and paste into other applications. It doesn't have to be the graphic suite. So if you're working with Microsoft Office or any other applications that let you copy and paste, you can do that from Corel Connect. So it's a very, very versatile application. So let's go back to CorelDRAW. And now I'm just going to open up my tray and show you, first of all, that we have all our collected assets in here. But I'm also going to show you another brand new feature called the Layout Toolbar. Now, the Layout Toolbar allows you to take objects and shapes and turn them into power clip frames, text frames, or if they've already been assigned a frame type, you can turn them back to plain shapes. You can add columns to lines of text. And within the Layout Toolbar, it's another brand new tool called the Alignment Guides, which is another way of aligning objects that we're going to be looking at. But to start off, I'm just going to select the top row of squares, and I'm going to combine these to one object. So I'm going to click on Combine, and this will now behave as one object, and I'm going to turn this object into a power clip frame. And you can see it's a power clip because this cross is now going right away across all four objects. And I've just realized that I've forgotten an object that I wanted to bring in, so I'm just going to minimize this for a second. I'm going to go back into Connect because I need a nice landscape picture. So let me just quickly put in landscape. And this is the one I'm looking for. Here we go. And I'm just going to drag this into here. Now this is looking nice already, but I can't actually see that's the sea. It could even be a snowy landscape for all we can see here. But underneath the power clip is now a brand new power clip toolbar. So I can edit the power clip, I can select the contents, I can remove the contents, or I've got different fitting options. I'm going to fill the frame proportionally. And now I've got this very nice beach scene running across the top of my menu here. And I'm just going to go ahead now and just convert the rest of these squares into power clip objects. And let's put some food in here. So put this one in here and fill frame proportionally. And let's go for this one. Fill frame proportionally. And I'm going to put some pasta in here. And then we've got some dessert. Okay. Now, if by some chance you don't like the colours and you want to edit one of your images here, just click on Select Power Clip Contents, and these square handles around the outside will turn to round handles. I'm just going to get rid of that for a second. So I'm just going to click on Select Power Clip Contents. I now get these selection handles, and what you can then do, even though it's inside of a power clip, you can go up to bitmaps, and go into the Image Adjustment Lab. Now, to make sure I don't ruin my original, I'm just going to create a snapshot of my original image, and I'm just going to warm up the temperature a little bit, make this dish look more inviting, just increase the contrast a little bit, and create a snapshot. And then you can always go into here and just have a look at before and after. But I think I'm going to go with the second version, and I'm going to click on OK. And that adjustment has now been made to that image. So let's just go out, and that's what we've got so far. So now it's time to start adding the actual menu itself. So I'm just going to switch my guidelines back on. And what I'm going to do now is just create another couple of text boxes here. So let's create one frame here. And I want this to be roughly 80 millimeters wide, to just make sure I can fit everything in. And I'm just going to hit the plus key and just make a couple of duplicates here. I'm not particularly worried about the alignment because we're going to do that with our alignment guides. Now, I have a document open here. It's a WordPerfect document, but it could be Microsoft Word or any other text document that you have, because the owner of this restaurant sent me his restaurant ingredients. But before I copy them in, the first thing I'm going to do is convert these boxes now into text containers. So these are now ready to have text placed in them. Now, you may or may not have heard of a term called Greeking. And what Greeking means is it means placing dummy text inside of a text container, just so you can get a rough idea of what the layout looks like. Brand new in CorelDRAW X6 is the option to right-click and insert placeholder text. Now, this placeholder text is by default lorem ipsum, but if you're not quite sure what text you're going to be using in your design, just place the elements, text elements using placeholder text, and it'll give you an idea of what your layout looks like. If you want to use a custom placeholder text, you need to save your text document under the name of placeholder text.rtf, and you'll save that in your user profile under My Documents, Corel Content. For more about this, just check the online help file, and it'll give you the instructions again of creating your own placeholder text. But I'm just going to undo this because I don't need placeholder. I've been given some text. So I'm just going to open up my text document, and we're going to start by entering the starters menu. So I'm just going to copy this, and with my text tool here, I'm just going to paste this in. Just do Control V actually. Now, if I maintain fonts and formatting, it will bring the text in looking exactly as it did in the original text document, which I don't want. I could also maintain formatting only or discard both of that. So I'm going to choose this option. But I don't actually want to work with Arial. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up another brand new feature in CorelDRAW, and this is called the Object Styles Docker. So down to the Dockers and Object Styles. Now, a style is a collection of object properties. If I right-click on a style and say New Style, I can choose what type of style I'm trying to create. Am I creating an outline style, a fill style, or in this case I want to create a character style. And I'm going to give this character style a name, and I'm going to call it menu text. And now I can add the properties of this text. So I'm going to choose my Fruitica serif again, and I think I'm going to go with font size 11, and I'm going to leave it black. So what I can do now is with my pick tool I can select an object and choose to apply this style to the selected object, and the text is now changed. And I'm going to go ahead now and just add some more menu text. I might have to stretch this box a little bit because I've got more text in here than actually fits. And let's go ahead and just place some more text in here. So now I've got the main dishes. Coming over to here, F8 to switch to the text tool, click in the box, Control V, discard fonts and formatting, OK. Again, not quite enough room in here, so I'm just going to stretch this out. And again, I'm just going to apply this particular style to this. Now, why would you bother creating styles? If I collect a set of styles within a document, I can export this as a style sheet. In the future, if I need to do any more work for this restaurant, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I just import my style sheet and I can just drag and drop styles onto objects, and I've got an object and then I've got a document identical to the original one that I had. You can also send style sheets out to other CorelDRAW X6 users, for example, if you've created some particularly lovely styles that you want everybody to be able to use. So the last bit of text I want to enter on this page are the desserts. So copy, F8 for the text tool, click, paste in, discard fonts and formatting, and apply to selected. Now at the moment I want to make a couple of adjustments here. I want to create another style just for the title here. So I'm going to create another new style. It's going to be a character style. It's going to be basically the same as the menu style. Oops. But I'm going to make this white, and I'm going to call this dish names. Okay, so I'm just going to go in here now and just apply to selected. And once I've done this, I'll show you why using object styles is really useful. Go into here. Now at the moment we're dealing with just a simple 4-page document. But just imagine for a second you've got a 50-page document or a 100-page document, and you've just done normal text and normal text formatting. You haven't created pardon me, any object styles. Just imagine that your boss comes and says, you know that font, we want that changed, we're not using this font anymore. Could you go and change it on 100 pages? That would be painful. But if you select a style, all you need to do is to change the property of the style, and every single object within the document on every single page is automatically updated. And that is the real power of working with object styles. Let's just go back to white. I'm going to make another couple of changes here. I'm going to just click on this object, and I'm going back to the object properties docker and the outline properties because I don't really want a box around my text. So I'm just going to say no outline, no outline, no outline. Let's just go out a little bit just to look at this. And what you can also see is I need to do a little bit more formatting here. So I'm going to go down in the Object Properties window, and again I've got all my justification options here. So I'm just going to justify these. Now if I look at this, you can see obviously my text is not lining up. But we have another brand new feature in X6 which is called the baseline grid. And this baseline grid runs across every page throughout the document. So if I click on my text now and say align to baseline grid, that's exactly what it's going to do. I just need to move this up a little bit. Let's go down here and let's align to baseline grid. And if you do this on every page, your text will be lined up throughout your multi-page document. If I just go over to these empty pages, you can see I've got the same baseline grid. So let's just turn this off again. And I'm also going to turn off the guidelines because I want to show you the new alignment guides. Now, over here we have the alignment guides, and this may be a little difficult to see, I hope not. As I move around, you might see between the top edges of that dessert and my box, you might just be able to see dotted lines appearing, telling me I've got it lined up on the left-hand side. And as I move up here, can you see perhaps the yellow dotted lines appearing, telling me that I'm lining up again to the right and to the center of my document. Let's just go down here. Sometimes, depending on the screen, it can be a little bit difficult to see this. As I just move across slowly, perhaps you can just see the yellow dotted lines appearing, telling me when I'm lined up on the page. So all that's missing now is a couple of titles here. So let's just type starters. And I'm just going to create an object style for this. Or another way, if you want to, if you've already formatted your text, let's go back up to object properties. I could, for example, format this here by changing the color, changing the font. Let's move this over here. And I'm just going to go in here and just apply the same stylistic set as I did before, and that was small caps. Okay, it's a little bit too big. Let's pull this down, perhaps to 18. Okay. Over on the Object Styles panel, I can right-click Styles and say, create a new style from the selected character. And it's basically creating a style from these options. And I'm going to call this headers. Okay, so I'm just going to finish this quickly. Drag this down, and one more. Select the object, headers, apply to selected. Let's move down here. Just out the way for a second. So, and this is the second page. As I said, we're a little bit short on time, so I'm doing this quite quickly, but I hope you get the general idea of what we're doing. So, on to page 3. And now we're going to be creating a page for the wines and spirits. So again, let's go into the Object Manager. Just make sure I'm on page 3 and I'm on the right layer, and double-click, create a frame, 2 millimeters. And now I'm going to open up my tray again, because I've got a little file here called Wine Glass Silhouettes. This is an EPS PRM file. There isn't any text in here, so I'm just going to import this as curves. This is a group of objects, so I'm just going to go up here and ungroup them and just drag out a couple of elements that I want to use in my design. Keep double clicking on it for some reason. Let's just move my mouse pad. Drag this out. Oops. And just get rid of the ones that I don't want. Okay. For this I'm going to turn off snapping because I want to be able to slide my objects around the page. So I'm just going to increase the size of this. Perhaps something like that, perhaps even a little bigger. And I'm going to take out the fill of this. Let's just, and I'm going to put a white outline around it. I've got a little WebEx bar across my colour palette at the moment. This object, I'm going to do the same. Let's just make this larger. Let's just slide this down here. Again, white outline and no fill. Now these objects are actually hanging over the edge of the page, so I need to get rid of the overlap. So what I'm going to do is just get my crop tool, and I'm going to crop around the outside of this page, and now my objects have been cut off. They're still hanging over the edge here, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this, and with Control Page Down, just move this. My pick tool is the better tool to use for this, of course. It hasn't cropped it yet. I can still see some of this. Let me just give myself a little bit more space. I almost got through the whole demo today without anything going wrong, so let's just try cropping this again. For some reason my crop tool, let's just change the dimension. Let's go back here. See, it always goes wrong once in a demo, folks. For some reason it wants to crop the whole page. That's okay, let's just double click. I think it's taken off some of my background. Sorry about this, folks, but anyway, it just shows that I'm human. So let's go here. I'm going to put another frame around this. Let's just get rid of this one. So let's put my frame back. Okay. So now I've got my object and it has been cut off now. So I'm just going to zoom in here and grab my 2-point line tool because I want to put some wine in these glasses. So I'm going to hold down my Control key just to get a horizontal line here. Let's put another one across here. And using the Smart Fill again, I'm just going to put some wine in the glass. Just remove these lines. And just go Control Page Down just to move the wine behind the frame. A brand new feature in this version of Draw is if you press down the central mouse button, the cursor turns into a pan button. So I can just press the mouse button and just pan through. So another couple of lines down here. And again, Smart Fill tool, just choose a nice red colour. Just get rid of these objects. Control Page Down to put it behind the frame again. Okay, so that was what I was aiming for. I'm now going to add another couple of text frames. If I want to save time, I could just copy one of these, but I'm just going to create another couple of frames here. Let's turn the guidelines back on. And you might be able to see now that because the alignment guides are still on, you can still see these yellow dotted lines appearing. So I'm just going to quickly draw a frame here for some text. And down here as well. So let's turn this into, there's already a text box. So I've got my two text boxes and back to my text document. So now we're going to scroll down and add some spirits and some wines. So Control, back to Draw, paste. I'm going to back to my object styles and I'm going to use menu text just to see what this looks like. Oh, that was the black text, wasn't it? Okay. Let me just create a new style for this. I'm going to create a new style. It's going to be a character style. I'm going to call this Spirits. I probably need a new style anyway because this text is going to be a lot larger than the other text. I want this to be white and fruitiger. And let's just apply this to the selected object. Okay. Now, over on the object properties, let's just right align this. Over here, I think I'm going to get rid of this text box and just make life easier for myself by copying this one, plus on the keyboard, and just replacing the text, and it's already formatted for me. So back to my text document, copy my wines, just select all of this, paste in, And this time I want this to be left aligned. Just select the whole text here perhaps. Okay. Let's just go into a full page view just to see what that looks like. Okay, this can go down a little bit. And all I need to do now is to put some titles in. Spirits. Let's have a look at the object styles. Perhaps I could use the header for this. That's looking okay, but perhaps I want to use that, perhaps I change this to black. And plus on the keyboard to copy that text. And change this to wines. Now I'm just going to zoom in now with Z just to see what this looks like. And I just need to move this around a little bit. So I'm just going to try to align this. On my screen I can see that the top right hand corner where the A of grappa is aligning with the S of spirits. So that's more what I was looking for. And that doesn't look bad. So that's basically our wine and spirits page. And now we're moving on to the last page. I can see that I'm already over time here. I've got one more page to go, and I hope we've still got some time, a little bit of time to do some questions. If not, I will answer all questions by email. So the very last page, let's just do this quickly. Layer 1. So I want to show you one really cool feature before we go. And back to my connect tray here, and I'm now going to drag in another graphic file. This is of course quite huge, so I'm just going to scale this down and P on the keyboard to center this. Just turn off this. So I'm just going to move this around a little bit. Now, because we're running out of time, what I would normally have done is just have added a tea and coffee menu here, but I want to show you one last really cool feature, and that is the new color harmony window. So we're going into Dockers and we're going to open up color styles. Now, I have several colors in here. If you've got objects that you need to play around with the colors just to see what they look like on different backgrounds, doing it manually can take quite a lot of time. But if I grab this graphic now and drag this over to the new color harmony window, I get the offer in the color styles window to create a color harmony or a color style. I'm going to put this into one color harmony folder. Now I've got 3 colors here, 1, 2 and the background. I don't want the background to change because I want to put text on here. So I'm just going to eliminate this background color from the harmony colors. So I'm just deleting this, and I have 2 colors left. These 2 colors represented here can be now moved through the color harmony wheel, and they're actually changing online as you see on screen. If you want to change one color only, select that color. For example, I can change this, I can make it a little bit lighter, and you see it updating on the screen. Deselect to select both colors again, and again you can just go through here and change the colors live on screen. It's a fantastic way of changing multiple colors within seconds to create different color combinations. And when you've finished creating your objects and your color styles, don't forget you can go down here, over here, and export all of your object styles, all of your color styles as a style sheet. Well, this was just basically the very quick overview of creating multiple documents. I could also have mentioned the fact that you can now add page numbering on the layers, but I think we're running out of time, so I'm just going to open this up and ask Cecile if there are any questions.
Hi, Suzanne.
I'm sorry, Cecile, I've gone over the time again, haven't I?
No, I think you still have about 7 minutes before jumping into
Ah,
the question and answer session. So at the present
oh,
time, we
that's
already have 4 very interesting questions. I don't know
okay.
if you would like a little more time for your demo or if you would like to jump into the Q&A session now.
I just wanted to show 2 really important new features. That
Okay.
will take me about 2 minutes,
Okay.
and then we can jump straight into the questions.
Okay.
Now, in previous versions of CorelDRAW, if you wanted to enter page numbering, it was painful. You had to go up to Tools, down to Macros, run a macro, open up the page numbering macro, not comfortable at all. Now in X6 we can go to Layout and we now have Insert Page Number. A page number can be inserted on the active layer only, so if I'm here on page 4 layer 1 I would have a number on that page only, or I can insert it on all pages or odd and even pages. Odd is greyed out here because I happen to be on an even page. Let's choose all pages, and you can see here I have a number. I mean, you wouldn't really put a page numbering on a menu, but it's just about showing you the principle. Draw knows that we're on page 4, and as I go over here you can see that I've got the number in here. Now, often you do not want a number on the front of a document. So if I go back up to Layout and into the page number settings, I can start at number 1, but not on page 1. In this case, I want to start on page 2. And you also have different types of numbering here. So I'm just going to say OK. Now the number disappears from page 1 and now starts numbering from page 2. If you make any adjustments to the numbering, this again is reflected automatically on each page. If I add a page to my document, again that automatically gets updated with the numbering. So the last thing I wanted to show you before we go into question time and my voice disappears is that we have new master layer options, also brand new in X6. If you open up any book that you have at home, you'll more than likely find that the right and left pages, or as they're called in layout terms, recto and verso pages, they sometimes have different things on the bottom or at the top of the page. If I select, for example, an even page here, the master layer for odd pages is greyed out, but I do get an option to create a master layer for even pages. Let's go. I'm going to go back to the first one here. Let's do it for odd pages. So I'm going to call this URL, and I've got a URL that's only going to appear on odd pages. Let's just type in www.contrast.com. I'm not really going to bother formatting this now. I'm just going to leave it as it is. I'm just trying to get to my colours here. Let's just bring this down here to make it a little bit smaller. It's just about the principle. So it's on an odd page, not on the even page. On the odd page, so again, you can build up different things on different layers. So Cecile, that's all basically that I wanted to show today. So if we want to go into questions now.
Excellent. Thank you, Suzanne. So, first question, can you set hotkeys for styles?
Ah, I really don't know. Okay, this is one. Cecile, can you collect these? Because sometimes, folks, I get questions that I've never been asked before, or that I've never actually thought about before. But let's have a look. I'm just going to go into, let me have a quick look here. I'm just going to go into the options and into customization, because if you can create a hotkey, it's going to be here where the commands are. So if we go into commands, and let's just drop down to show all items, and we'll just wait for the list. There are many, many, many more commands in CorelDRAW than you actually see in these menu bars. It's worth having a look here. So if I just go down here, what have we got here? Define. Let's want internet. I'm just going to go down to, let's go down to styles. Let me just scoot down here for a second. No, it doesn't. We don't appear to have any. But I will chase this up and ask some of our draw gurus who've been working for Corel for many years longer than I have if they know if there's any way around it, because that would, of course, be a very useful option to have. I agree with you there.
Okay, Suzanne. Anyway, this question is coming from Sue, and I'm going to take her email address in order to let her know directly.
Okay.
Another question from Tatiana. Can you please repeat how the cups are mirroring each other?
This, on page 5? This one?
Yes, I guess so. Yes.
Well,
Yes.
basically, if this is a grouped object. If you break an object apart, for example, you can ungroup everything. Okay, and these are all separate objects. Let me just give this a colour that we can see here. I'm just going to drag this out. Right, I've got an object here, Tatiana. If I hit plus on my keyboard, I'm creating a copy on top of this one. And up here on the property bar, we have the mirroring tools. You can mirror horizontally or vertically. So if I click mirror vertically, and holding the control key to constrain the movement to a vertical direction, I can just drag that down, and now I've got a mirror image. And again, if I wanted to flip this over horizontally, I can select this and just flip it horizontally, and then just collapse this a little bit here, and then just move this over here, which is basically what we had here, wasn't it? Something like this. And that's basically how you do that. Hello?
Yes. Thank you, Suzanne. So, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was on mute. Tatiana says thank you very much. Another question, which is coming from Andrew. Actually, it's two questions related to the master page. First question, can you have more than one master page? Second question.
No, because the master page is exactly what it says, the master page. What you can do, if you need elements appearing on multiple pages, you've got the option, because whatever you put on a master page, you can create master pages and master layers. There's the master page, and these are the master layers. You can have master layers on a master page, and whatever is here, as we saw with the guidelines, is going to appear on every single page in the document. But just say you wanted to duplicate these cups, for example, all you need to do is right-click, click on Duplicate Page, and you can copy not only the layers of this page, but you can duplicate everything that's on there. So if I click on this now, and you can choose if you want to insert it before or after this page, I've basically created a duplicate of this page. So there's everything that was on this page is on this page. So it's not a master layer, but you've duplicated some of the elements. I don't know if that helps, Andrew.
Thank you, Suzanne. Second question, can you assign or de-assign master page to specific pages in the document? A cover, for example, wouldn't necessarily need columns as a content page would.
I'm not quite sure. Let me just open up a brand new document here. Let me just open up a new one, just with one page. Right, so here I've got an empty document here. So Andrew, can you just talk me through what you, or let Cecile know what you'd like me to try out for you?
Okay, so Andrew, I will let you come back to me regarding your second question. In the meantime, let's ask another question coming from Marsha. What is the maximum number of pages in a single document in X6?
I'm not 100% sure. I think it's something like 999. But Marsha, I will check that out for you again.
Okay, I will take her email address.
I've never had the time or the patience to create a 999-page document, Marsha. But again, I will check that out for you. What the maximum? I think it's 999, something like that.
Okay, I will take her email address. Marsha, can you send me your email address?
Yeah. But one comment to that, Marsha. If you are creating really, really large documents and you're going to have lots of images in it, lots of text, this version of CorelDRAW is native 64-bit and it also supports multi-core and multi-threading. So if you've got a powerful computer, it will use the processes in parallel. So it's the fastest version of Draw yet. If you're using an older computer which meets the specifications for installing Draw, that's fine, but if you're creating huge documents, you've got to realize it's going to be using up your RAM as well. So you've got different considerations there. Instead of bringing in high-res images, you might want to link in images or use low-res images as placeholders. There are whole different things to take into consideration when you create really large documents. Perhaps this could be a topic for another webinar at some time.
Thank you, Suzanne. We have Marsha, Suzanne. In the meantime, we have one of our customer users who has checked for us, and he said that we can have 998 pages maximum.
Oh, damn, I'm 1 page out.
Yeah, exactly. Another question, how you put page numbers on different orientation pages, from Jordan.
Does Jordan want the page numbers themselves to be rotated, or just the pages?
I will let Jordan come back to me. I don't know exactly.
Because if I just add a couple of pages here. Right, if I go up to the property bar, I can have pages with different orientations. So page 1 is vertical, page 2 we can have landscape, and page 3 is vertical again. So let's insert, so I've got 3 pages here, Jordan. And again, this is something I've never tried before, but I love a challenge. Now, I'm on page 1. So what happens if I just insert page numbers on all pages? Right, so what I get is this number appearing in the same position on each page. So it's obviously not what we want in this case. So let's just undo that. And what happens now if I put the page number on the active layer, which is this layer here? So that's page 1. And let's go on to page 2 on the active layer. And let's put a page number on that active layer. And now it's put it in the right position. So it's not outside. So this one is in a different position to this one. So basically they appear to be decoupled. If you put them on, so you can actually number the pages, but once you start putting them on separate layers rather than throughout a whole document, you can actually number them. If I continue through here, again, I'd have to put this in manually now. I don't know if that answers your question. If you need all the numbers to be formatted the same, you could of course just create an object style and call that page numbering and just apply that to all of the page numbers.
Thank you, Suzanne. Another great question. It is possible to export a multi-page document as an ebook?
I don't think from CorelDRAW. That's mostly possible. That's usually possible from more Office applications like WordPerfect Office, for example. And I believe, Cecile, WordPerfect's a more popular product at your end, that there's actually a plugin for WordPerfect to export ebooks. What you can do though is you can, of course, at any time export a multi-page document as a PDF. And if you have any ebook applications, because out in the internet you do have applications for converting documents into ebooks, you could then bring in your PDF and then re-export it as an ebook probably. Because if I go down here, I've got my export options. You do have a huge number of export options. You've got over 100 different file formats in here, and in addition you also have the option of exporting to PDF, and then you've got the different options here, pre-press, web. So those options you do have. But Cecile, can you write that down as well and just send that to me, because that's another thing that I'll check up.
Yeah, I've just asked Craig to send me his email address in order to do some further investigations. Another question, how would the baseline grid react if, for example, the dish name were a different size than the remainder of the text?
Now, if you double click on the ruler and I go down to grid, down here I've got the baseline grid settings. At the moment it's set to 14 point. So what this means is, and I would also ask you to look in the help file for this, if I just set up, let me just open up baseline grid again, whether text fits on the baseline or jumps a line will depend on the size added to the leading distance. That's basically the line spacing between the top of the body of the text and the baseline text. So if let me just do this quickly. So I've got 14 point here. So let's just turn on the baseline grid. I'm just going to put in a little darker background here so we can see what we're doing. Something like that. Okay, let's turn on the baseline grid. So this is a 14 point baseline grid. I'm just going to draw up a text box here, go into the object properties, and I'm just going to put some placeholder text in here. Now by default this placeholder text is Arial. It's 12 points. When I change the size, it doesn't fit quite exactly on the text, on the font. I need to basically align to baseline grid. So 12 point text will fit on the 14 point baseline grid with space to spare. If I change this to 14 point, just put this in by hand, it's still following the grid, but it doesn't have enough space to basically fit on every single line because the line spacing is too large. I don't know if that makes sense. Just open this up a little bit. The best thing to do, if you check in the help file, it tells you exactly how baseline grids work. Baseline grids are basically the grid that every document bases itself and sets itself up on. If I go down to 10, we'll just put 10 in here, sorry. Again, it's going to fit on the line and you've got more line spacing left here. So it works quite well with fonts below 14 when you've got some line spacing set up here between. But if you get the font that's larger than the grid, of course it's going to have to jump lines in order to fit in. I don't know if that was a good explanation or not.
Okay. Thank you, Suzanne. Another question, can you duplicate multiple pages at a time, just like you can insert multiple pages?
No, I don't think you can. You can delete multiple pages at a time. Well, let me just check. I'm just going to check one thing under layout. If I click on duplicate page, it only lets me duplicate page 3, that is the one page, in a specific position. However, I could, for example, say, if I say insert page, it will ask me how many pages do I want to insert. Do I want to insert it before or after page 3? So I'm on page 3 now. I could choose to insert 4 pages. Okay. And it's now just put in 4 pages after that. But it's not duplicated anything that might have been on page 3. It's just basically added 4 pages. The same thing applies to deleting pages. If you need to delete pages, you can say delete from page, I don't know, page 1 through to page 5. And then it will delete all of those pages at one go, but at the same time reassigning page numbers to the remaining pages. So 6, 7 and 8 have now become 1, 2 and 3. So the answer is, I'm sorry, no, you can't duplicate multiple pages. Unless you go through, of course, and just duplicate and then just repeat this process. There is one thing we could try. Let me just try something. I just want to do an experiment here. Let me just turn the grid off for a second.
Suzanne?
Yes?
Sorry to cut you. Somebody at TIS is telling us that you can duplicate page sorter view. We select the pages, control move.
Sorry, can you repeat that, Cecile?
You can duplicate page sorter view with selecting the pages, control move.
Ah. Who is this guy? We need him to come up here and do some webinars. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to save his answer and perhaps share the answers later.
Yeah, do share that, because that is, I mean, I've been working for Draw for several years now. That is one thing that I never knew. And but having said that, I mean, even if you do work with Draw for years and years, it's like working with the tip of an iceberg. There's always stuff that you discover every day new. I just wanted to try one thing. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I just want to try one thing. I'm just going to put an object down here. And I just want to see if it's possible to record page duplication using a macro. So if I go up to Tools, Macros, and Record a Macro, and I'm just going to call this Duplicate Page. I said, folks, I've got no idea if this is going to work or not. Duplicate Page, save it in Global Macros, and if I now duplicate the page, copy their contents, so I've now got 2 pages. If I stop the macro now, and when I'm going to go up now, I'm going to go up to Options, Customization. I'm going to drop down to Macros, and here's the Duplicate Page macro. I'm just going to give that a key shortcut. Let's call this Alt-K. I said I've got no idea if it's going to do this, but let's try. So I'm just going to change the colour so that we can see if it's really duplicating or not. Right, so let's try Alt-K. And it hasn't worked. Never mind. So you can't do this during the macro. No, but do send me that tip, because I'd really like to give that a try.
Yeah, I will, for sure. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but Suzanne, I really would like you to spend perhaps the 2-3 last minutes around the TrueType fonts, OpenType fonts. We have several questions, so let me ask all the questions around the TrueType fonts. So the first one from Timothy is about is it only TrueType fonts that use the ligatures? Or is it only TrueType font that use the styles option in the properties box?
Well, it's not actually TrueType, it's OpenType. So TrueType, if you drop down the list here, you've got some fonts that have this O in front. These are the OpenType fonts. And I've also got some old fonts in here. They've got a double T in it, which is TrueType. The TrueType, let me just show you here. Right, let's try, let me just type something in here. Right, Right, Arial, although it's an OpenType font, as I mentioned at the beginning, the different OpenType properties that you're going to have available, or OpenType features, better said, will depend on what the font manufacturer has actually put into his type. This is Arial, but although it's OpenType, if I select it, this is all grayed out and I don't get this little arrow here, because with Arial, what you see is what you get. If I change this to a TrueType font, okay, again, if I select this, you've got no OpenType features here because it's a TrueType font. Let's change this. Let's change this to a proper TrueType font. I've got another one that's included. Let me just go down here. I'm just looking for one that we haven't used before. Let's try. Let me just try something. Let's just see what actually this font has on, if it has any features or not. And again, another TrueType that doesn't have any features in it. So it really does depend on what the manufacturer. Here we've got two different. We've got small caps and we've got original. And some fonts, for example, like Sapfino, for example, have got tons of features. Let me just bring this size down a little bit. So here you've got all these different, you've even got actually ornaments. You can see here the ornaments is active. As I go over the different categories, you'll see these being highlighted here in the Docker. So these have got just loads and loads of different style sets with them. When I was preparing my tutorials, I actually went online and just looked up, I just basically Googled OpenType fonts with OpenType functionality or OpenType features. And there are actually websites out there with lists of fonts that have loads of features with them. So that's also perhaps something, if you're into typography and you love beautiful fonts, that's probably something you could also check out.
Thank you, Suzanne. Suzanne?
Yes?
Yeah. We still have very good questions. So I've taken email address from people in order to answer them. Maybe you can perhaps answer last one, and then we'll close after this this question. By the way, you have there are very positive feedback coming from our participants.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So I'm taking the last the last question. So the last question for you to answer online is, how did you get multiple boxes to take a power clip?
Yes, I'll show you that. That was actually something I discovered by accident. It's another one of these things that Draw can do that I never knew about until I tried it. So now if I create some boxes here, it's like this. These of course are separate objects. I can turn each one of these into a power clip object on its own. However, if I group these, it still, although this is a group, it still creates separate power clip boxes. So let's just undo that. So what I tried out was, I tried just selecting the two boxes and under Arrange, combining them. Now when you combine the objects, it's actually a single object, which is why when I click on Power Clip Frame, the frame is going across both boxes now. If I just open the tray now and then just drag this in, the image is now spread over the two boxes. If I go into Edit, Power Clip, you can see this is the actual image, which is huge, of course. You can actually zoom out if you want to and, you know, change the shape by hand, or you could rotate it, stuff like that. And you've got the Finish Edit button here. But you can also just go here and just say Fit It. Now, because I've rotated it, of course, it's not fitting as neatly, or you can actually stretch it to fill the frame. But because I've now rotated it, it's of course looking a little bit weird. But you get the general idea. So If you want to put it in multiple shapes, we could do something like this. Then just select these, arrange, combine, convert to power clip frames, open this up, drag this in, and so you can split it over multiple objects proportionally, and you know, get some really interesting designs going on your page. So if that was the last question, then thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial and I hope it was useful for you. There are so many really excellent new features in CorelDRAW X6 that even though I work for Corel, I do have to say that it's a fantastic version and well worth upgrading to, just for the object properties, the color harmonies, the layout toolbar and the master layers. It's just a fantastic version and I hope you're all going to have a lot of fun with that. So is Cecile still online? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm still online, so thank you very much, Suzanne. Yes, you can also download your trial on corel.com/CorelDRAW. The trial is free for 30 days, and also the webinars will be available. The recorded session will be available in a few hours, either directly by using the same email address you have used to register, or it will be available also on corel.com/webinars. Thank you very, very much to everybody for your active participation. Our next webinar will be on May 24th, and we will have the chance to have a complete tour around Corel website Creator X6. In the meantime, I wish you a very good month. Bye.
Bye.